Hey everybody, this is the Bowtie Sales Guys. Hope you're doing well. We're happy to be with you today. I'm Robb Ryerse, alongside with Mike Papacoda, and we are here to give you some tips and tricks and things that can help you be successful as a salesperson. You know, Mike, there are millions of salespeople all over the country. What percentage of those do you think are good at what they do?
Good. I think a lot of them are good, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of them that are good,
this is very diplomatic of you to not insult our audience
but
right out of the
but
gate.
uh, but the greats. How many are the greats? Like the best of the best. I would say probably 1 or 2% are the best of the best. Everybody. There's a lot of good, just below greats. If you watch the NBA, they're not all superstars. You got people that are out there just doing the work, getting
Yeah,
it done. And I kind of look at sales kind of the same way.
yeah. But I mean, so many different fields. I mean, there's retail, real estate, you know, media, there's automotive, there's outside sales, inside sales. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's just unbelievable how many different types of sales are salespeople there are out there, and how inundated the average person is with the opportunity to buy something
Oh yeah.
constantly. And
Yep.
so often, what makes the difference is a good salesperson. You know, I told the story a couple weeks ago about us needing a new roof and wanting to get solar panels along the way, and it was essentially the salesman that kept us from making that purchase. Well, wouldn't you know, this week we had a couple of guys come out to the house to check on things and give us an estimate, and it was night and day experiences compared to the first
All
guy
right.
that came out. And you know, it just makes such a difference to be good at this craft. And
Oh yeah.
that's what this podcast is all about, is helping people be good at this craft. We've got, between the two of us, a whole lot of experience in doing this, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in all sorts of different realms and in different venues. And so we're here to kind of share some of our experiences, share some of the things we've learned, and encourage you to do the things that will make you one of those 1% great salespeople that are out there.
Yes, the Michael Jordan of sales.
Well, I would say the LeBron James of sales, but that's probably a whole different
How about
podcast,
the
right?
Wade Gretzky of sales? Can we agree on that?
Sure.
Probably not.
One thing that we can agree on is that so often sales prospects, sales meetings, sales opportunities get botched, get derailed by sales presentations, sales meetings that go badly. And so today what we want to do is talk about a big idea. We're going to share a big idea with you today. We're also going to give you a tip that you can use today. But our big idea today is one of the things that we've learned that make sales presentations effective, that make the kinds of connections you need with a customer, make them natural, make them easy, and make you as a salesperson and the product that you're selling memorable. So our big idea today is that facts tell, but stories sell. Now, Mike, you and I had a sales manager who used to say this all the time, and it sounded kind of cliche when he would say it. And then eventually, over time, I totally bought in.
Right.
Totally bought in.
It took a while, but listen, it's a good saying. It sounds cliche, but when you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And so I can see why you would buy in.
Yeah. So the basic idea here is that if you are going to simply rehearse facts, features, benefits, statistics, details, those things can be interesting. They can inform a customer. They can maybe move the ball along a little bit. But really, the thing that sells people, that draws them in, that excites them, that gives them that emotional connection that causes them to make a purchase is a story. And there's good science behind this. There's been many studies that have been done about how our brains think in stories. Like, this is how we remember things. This is how our brain works. So let me tell you a story. Mike, do you know who Kevin Trudeau is? Do you remember that name?
The name definitely sounds familiar, yes.
Kevin Trudeau was one of these guys that back in the early 90s, mid 90s, if you were up late at night flipping through the dial, watching TV because you couldn't sleep, you were probably going to come across a Kevin Trudeau infomercial. Where he
How
would
to get
be
rich, right? Rich overnight, real estate, something like that. Buy houses with other people's money.
Yeah, exactly. Ding, ding, ding.
I remember.
Exactly. Well, I didn't fall prey to one of Kevin Trudeau's programs that where you would get in the mail, you'd order this and you'd get in the mail a big box of cassette tapes to listen to. And I talk about passive income, right? In today's vernacular. So it was one of my best friends in college who was flipping through the dial one night, and he came across a Kevin Trudeau infomercial, and it was the Mega Memory infomercial. The Mega Memory program. It was this program that was going to teach us how to remember everything. And so I remember my buddy comes into my dorm room, and my best friend and I are sitting there, and he comes in and he's got this Mega Memory plan. He's like, guys, I got it figured out. We're going to do this course and we're not going to have to study ever again. So we decide, like, okay, let's do this. Let's jump in. And so, we had this kind of clandestine study group in which we learned the principles of Kevin Trudeau's Mega Memory. Now, here's the thing. The whole idea is based on the reality that our brains think in stories. So if you're going to remember something, you need to create a story in which you can be triggered to remember that. So he has a whole bunch of different principles. One of the things, the program itself, not super effective. But I'll tell you this, I have to this day retained one of the things that we learned, which was the idea of what he called peg it to your body list. And what that means is, it's like if you have a to-do list, if you have a list of things you need to remember, so what you do is you take parts of your body, starting with your toes, and then your shins and your knees and your thighs, and moving up through your body. You think about like your grocery list, and you think about that part of the body, and with each item that's on your grocery list, you create a story that connects that part of the body and that thing that's on your list. And then, because you're never going to forget the parts of your body, right?
Exactly. No.
And then, so what you do is when you're going through the grocery store and you just think about your toes, and that will trigger the memory of the story that you created in your mind about, and it had to be emotional, it had to be funny, it had to be outrageous, it had to be memorable. So maybe if you are, broccoli is on your grocery list, you imagine in your mind a story of how your toes begin to sprout and look like stalks of broccoli, and little kids are coming and picking them and eating them, and then they regenerate. And you just get this bizarre thing where, like, you create a story in your mind that then when you think about your toes, like, you remember, oh, broccoli. Because our brains think in stories.
Can I just say I'm glad I have an iPhone now? I don't have to remember about kids picking broccoli off my feet. But I get the point, but wow.
It's just true. Maybe that's why Kevin Trudeau is not around anymore, because iPhones have made him
that's right.
irrelevant. But
No
the
more
idea is
broccoli.
that broccoli feet. Stories are the thing that trigger memories for us. Stories are the things that connect in our brains that draw us into things. And so if we're going to connect well with customers, it's so important to tell stories. Stories that about effectiveness, stories about how this product can be used, stories that can give the customer it can let them imagine themselves in a different situation as a result of making this purchase.
Yeah, I remember, Rob, you and I talked about this. I think you may get into this. You had read a book that talked about making the customer the hero of the story, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and kind of alluding to what you said, making sure they're a part of the story, that they're the hero of the story, that they can see how it's going to impact them and how it's going to create this better world for them. And so I really enjoyed talking to you about that particular book.
Yeah.
Was it Story?
Story Brand by Don Miller.
Story Brand. Yeah,
Yep.
excellent book. So
Yep.
I remember us talking about that.
Yeah, and it's built on this idea that stories are the thing that actually compel people. So I was in a sales meeting once, presentation where there's a group of people that were meeting with somebody and trying to sell them on a project, an opportunity, this idea, and in the beginning there was kind of like the introductory time where people are kind of chatting and getting to know each other a little bit and and kind of build some rapport. And one of the people in the meeting was kind of telling a bit about his background and some of the things he had been involved in, and some of the work that he had done. And it was and he was like telling story. It was telling kind of his life story, his work story, but it was super interesting, super engaging, and there was a lot of banter. There's a lot of energy. There was a lot of sense of connections that like, hey, there's something here, and like synapses were firing, and I was kind of watching this happen between the client and the salesperson doing this, and there's like you could see the electricity between them, that they were connecting, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so, what do you think made that story interesting?
Well, I part of it is this is a charismatic person who
Right.
who's good at this. I think part of it was the similarities that between what their jobs were, and things. But then the next guy on the team goes and is going to introduce himself, and his voice got real low, and he kind of mumbled a bit, and he essentially read the mission statement of the company, and you could just see the energy in the room die. Like
Yeah,
it was gone. Like
yeah,
the electricity was snuffed out. There was nothing left to build from at that point. And
yeah.
it was just this kind of reality check that like stories bring an excitement, and facts, while they may be true, have this way of sucking all of the oxygen out of the room. I
Definitely.
don't know. Mike, you have any you have any sales stories that I mean, how have you used stories in being able to sell?
Yeah, I think stories are absolutely critical. And the reason I asked, why do you think made this story so compelling or so good, is because it is important to have a good story. Not all stories are good, and
Hmm.
so so when you start to think about how you're going to tell the story, you want to make sure that you put some real thought behind it. You don't want to. People don't want that big intro, you know what I mean, that kind of tells the whole backstory. The key is to drop them right into the story where the action is taking place. Like you want a big grab their attention with the story. Now, once you've got them hooked, you can start to get into making them the hero of the story, and what, what's the big climax, and then what's the resolution. And so I've always tried to, when I tell these stories, to start off with something that's going to hook them right in. Because I find when other people tell me stories and they want to give me a 5-minute prologue to get to the point of the story, it's just like, oh my God, could you get to the point of the story already? And so, you and I have worked together a lot on putting together stories for some pretty big companies. And the messaging, is around, listen, if we do this right, it's going to impact you in these ways. But let me tell you how it's impacted some of my other customers. And that's usually typically where I will take that story, is that this is where they were. This is what their problem was. And so I'm going to drop those people right into the middle of this story of, here's the conflict, what's happening, the turmoil. And then here was the solution that we proposed. Here's how we walked through it. And at the end of the day, this was the outcome. And what I want my customers to see is that this could be the outcome for you too. You can be a hero to your boss. You can be a hero to your customers. You can be a hero to your family. Whatever it is they've identified to me as important to them, I want them to see how it's going to impact them, but not just the facts, right? Not this car's going to go fast. Its car's got this much gas mileage on it. You can take your family on an amazing vacation. You're only going to have to stop twice. You're not going to have to get out of the car every 2 hours because this car's got a, great. It's how you tell that story and how you get them to picture and see it.
Yep, exactly. And there's so many different ways that stories can be used in the course of a sales presentation, whether it's the presentation itself or illustrating something that is difficult. Sometimes the technical aspects of the products and the services that we offer are difficult to explain when a story could do it much more effectively. I know, in times when I, worked in digital advertising and trying to explain like the details of like retargeting and things like that. And this is how it works. And there's a pixel that recognizes your IP address or your device ID. And you can begin to talk about like the technicalities of that. And then or you could say something like, you ever shopping on Amazon and you're looking for something, and then the next day all you see is ads for that product. It doesn't matter what website that you go to. That's retargeting. And like it's so, and that's just that's barely a story. It's just a very simple real life illustration of things that help people to understand. We don't have to expect our customers to want to dive into all the technical stuff and all the facts and the figures if we tell them stories that can move them along towards buying.
Yeah, one of my favorite Reddit sites is Explain It to Me Like I'm 5. And I try to, when you're trying to explain something very complicated, it's if you can figure out a way to explain it to someone with a story like they're 5 so that it makes sense, because we understand the ins and outs, but this is my first meeting with that customer. At the end of the day, they may want to know all the technicalities, but first they want to know, okay, simply, how is this going to work? How is this going to benefit me? I spent this last weekend with my nephews and nieces, and they're all sub 5, and they're in the why stage. Like, why this? Why that? Why does this do it that way? And so trying to explain to them with stories how the world works and the way that things go, but they are 5. And so explaining it to them like that, it kind of makes you think, okay, this works. This is very effective. It's powerful. It's a simple story, but it gets the message across. Yeah. And, I don't think it's a chance that we've used stories, throughout the history of mankind to pass down information, right? It's before we could write stuff down and we had iPhones. Stories were the way that we communicated history and information. And so it goes back to what you said, the science. There's science that backs it up, that stories stick in your brain and That's stories right. make you move and do different things. Back to your night, was it telemarketing? Not telemarketing, the infomercial.
Infomercial.
I actually bought one of those infomercials because of the story. It was
Mm-hmm.
the workout ones. What do you call it? Beachbody and
Ah,
P90X, and they went through all the stories of all these people losing weight, and I could envision myself doing the same thing the way
yep.
they told the story. And I ended up not only buying P90X, ended up buying P90X 2 and 3 because they did work, but it was the story that hooked me in first. Like, wow, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yep. Yeah. So there's illustrations that help explain maybe difficult aspects of the product or technicalities that are tough to come up with. There's success stories and case studies. There's kind of the whole brand presentation can be told in a story of here's what will happen to you if you make this purchase. There's personal anecdotes to build rapport. I mean, there's so many ways, so many different ways that stories can be utilized. That it is a tool in the toolbox that needs to be used often.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, if you're a salesperson out there, I mean, spend some time thinking about your stories and create good stories to go along with your sales pitches. So that's our big idea for today. Mike, we got a tip for folks, something that they can do today to be better at making sales. And that is our tip today is to use hunter.io to find email addresses. Now, Mike, you are one of those people who is, in my mind, like the king of email sales. Like, I mean, your ability to use cold emails and reaching out to customers that way to get a meeting that you then can move the sales process forward. And I mean, like, talk a bit about how you've used email so effectively.
Yeah, I think Rob, it goes back to storytelling. The email needs to tell a good story. You need to have a great subject line. I mean, it's just kind of like when you buy a book. Does the title hook you in? Is that, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. I would like to read that. So it starts with a really good title, and then the body of your email needs to be short and it needs to be sweet, but it needs to let the reader know what's in it for them. If I'm going to take this meeting, what am I going to get out of it? So you want to make sure you explain that. And then the other thing is you want to ask them to commit to a certain amount of time. Like, be very specific. I'm going to take 20 minutes. All I need is 20
20
minutes, a brief
minutes.
20 minutes to go over how I think that this partnership between our two companies would work. Will this particular date at this time work for you? And I'd love for us to do another podcast on the anatomy of putting together an effective email, because done right, for me, I think that email is one of the best forms of prospecting because it's the least invasive of all of the others, of calling, of showing up, and it can start a really good conversation if that email is constructed right. And so, Rob, this tip on being able to find those email addresses is key.
Yeah.
Because you have to know how to reach them. And today, with the way that emails are formatted, I mean, you could sit there all day guessing on the format of an email and you might never get it right. So to be able to have a tool that's going to help you find those emails effectively and efficiently to save you some time is key.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things. You've got to, it does no good if you've got email addresses and like a really bad email to send. And it does no good if you've got a great email to send and no email addresses.
Right.
So you got to have both. So
You do.
Hunter.io is a website where people can go to find email addresses. And it's one that I have used extensively, and I just highly recommend it to people. It's hunter.io. It's one of those weird ones. It's not a .com or a .org or a .net. I don't know what the IO is all about, but it's hunter.io. And how it works is when you put in a web address, a URL, a website, it searches that domain for email addresses that are associated with it, and it will return back to you all of the known email addresses that it can find associated with that website, and so you might find the person that you're looking for on the list, or it's going to tell you how that company formats its email addresses. Is it first name at company.com, or is it first initial and last name at company.com, or it will bring back that information. Now, some websites, depending on the company, some websites don't have the information is not available. It's not kind of publicly accessible. And so, this is not a tool that is going to find everything. It's not necessarily like a database. Like there are some tools out there that are databases that salespeople have entered information and put things in. This isn't that. This is more like a search engine for email addresses. And so it's not a guarantee that it's going to work, but when it does, I have found that hunter.io gives me like far more effective and consistent and usable results in finding email addresses for cold emails than any other tool that I've been able to find. Now, you might be saying, okay, this sounds like too good to be true, that this would just be, something free. And well, you're right. There are some limitations. They have a free plan, which lets you search up to 25, like have 25 searches a month. And then there are, additional plans that move up from there, from like $50 a month. And again, like that sounds expensive, which it certainly is. But if an email that you find from hunter.io, it turns into a $30,000 sale, $50 might be worth it.
Yeah, it seems like a very good investment. I think you need to look at any tool that you spend money on as an investment in your business, because really it is your business.
Yep. And what I would recommend to folks is sign up for a free plan and use that for a while. And if it's super effective, then, graduate from there. Now, here's what it looks like. So I put in, just as an example, I put in on here Tyson.com, because we're both based in Northwest Arkansas, where Tyson's a big company, and you might do a lot of calling on Tyson, whether for advertising or sales. It might be for equipment. I mean, it's unending the number of reasons that somebody might call on Tyson. And you see here, it says the most common pattern is first name dot last name at Tyson.com. And then there are a whole bunch of examples. And there's a person's name, which I kind of blocked out because we don't want to necessarily put that out there, though this is free public information, that if somebody just went to hunter.io and typed this in, they'd find it. But you get first name and last name, you get their title and their email address, and that little check mark means that it's been verified. You can check the source of where it came from, of how they found it, where they found it from, and you can search down through here, and there were hundreds of, 300 and some results just for Tyson alone. And so, this is a tool that I just highly recommend to people. You find that company's website, you find out who the person is at the company that you need to connect with, and their email address isn't listed. Just grab the URL, drop it into hunter.io, and see if their email address comes up. If it does, great. If it doesn't, at least you get the pattern of how they use it, and now you know, okay, this is what their email address is probably going to look like, and you've got a really good shot at getting your well-crafted quality email into their inbox, and hopefully a meeting, and ultimately a sale.
Yes, sir. That's what we want. Hopefully this tip they can, like you said, implement today.
Absolutely.
Get working on it.
Listen, those is Mike told you last week that you got to win Friday afternoons by setting up those prospect emails. Well, here's a way to do that. Spend some time on hunter.io, get those email addresses, and so you can send out really quality emails that can help drive sales. So, Mike, stories, emails, making sales. It's been, what we've tried to do as salespeople, and, another opportunity to share our insights with folks.
Absolutely. I was excited to talk about it, Rob, because you and I have talked about stories for years, how to craft them, how to tell a good story, because there's just so much to it. And we hopefully we'll be able to come back to this topic too, because obviously storytelling, that's kind of the key. But how do you tell a good story? And you are a fantastic storyteller. And maybe it's because you've got a background in being a pastor. You guys gotta you have to teach your flock, and stories teach. So
Yeah.
I'd love to come back and us discuss what are the parts of putting together a good story. So
Yeah, absolutely. Feels like we were just kind of scratching the surface of what's there. There's master class opportunities in becoming good storytellers. So Mike, great to chat with you today, and want to encourage everybody out there that keep at it, keep making those calls, doing the activity. You got this.